Our time as fantasy hockey GMs, it's about to go up a couple notches of intensity, which is why you're tapped back into your daily source for fantasy hockey news. And on today's show, everything you need to know from the Canadian teams making moves. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We've had a little bit of a lull in excitement after the Stanley Cup has been lifted, but it's go time once again, my fantasy fanatics, which is why we're welcoming you back inside the lab to the latest edition of your daily 30-minute source for everything fantasy hockey, so you can be prepared for next season's draft. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. Steele, we also got to show some love to all of our Canadians, fellow Canadians, north of the border or anywhere you're celebrating Happy Canada Day. It is July 1, Steele, free agency. Already a lot going on. Toronto Maple Leafs, we got to talk about it. Noah Dobson and the Montreal Canadiens. Fantasy fallout across the league. And if we can, we'll get to Evander Kane and Claude Giroux as well. Like I said, Steele, these Canadian teams already getting after it. Let's do the same on today's episode, my friend. We got the real life link up out of the way. Let's get after this fantasy takes so we can get our listeners to the top. Think you're on mute, brother.
Mute once again always gets me. It's been a while since we've done an episode, so that was coming for sure. But it's been an absolute blast so far this weekend. Finally, the legendary link up of Flip Livingstone and Steele Rodin happened after 4 years in the making. We got it done. Absolute pleasure. Let's get into these topics for today: Canadian deals, Canadian trades, Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens, Vancouver and Ottawa, if we can get to them as well. But let's start with our home team, the Toronto Maple Leafs, signing some incredible deals to very, very major pieces to this organization right now. We all know what's going on with Mitch Marner and the possibility of a sign-in trade with Vegas, maybe some tampering going on. We'll discuss that later in the week as well. Tavares does the city right. Does right by the fans and signs the most incredible hometown discount, $17.52 million over 4 years, annually making $4.38 million with the Toronto Maple Leafs hometown kid discount. We absolutely love it. We absolutely appreciate it. And to me, it's kind of funny because I still see a lot of fantasy hockey value with this player. And it's funny because I had a conversation with my dad the other day about this contract. How do you feel about John Tavares? And I absolutely love it. His response is, I hate him. I hate it. I don't know why we did this contract. He's so slow out there. He's still not producing. And I'm like, Father, he just had 74 points in 75 games. Yep. What else could you ask for from a 34, soon to be 35-year-old centerman who isn't the fastest skater anymore? So I don't know what my dad's smoking over there. I don't know what he's thinking about with this John Tavares contract, but I think it's phenomenal. He did this. He did right by the fans. He did right by the city. And this is how you build a championship team, with people not just trying to get the entire bag, every single penny they can get. He knows what this team's trying to do. He knows where he's at in his career. And the fact that we could get him less than Matt Duchene as well, absolutely terrific. I think fantasy hockey value-wise, when we talk about the top 5 targets for the Toronto Maple Leafs, he's going to be right there in the top 3, and he's done a phenomenal job so far.
John Tavares has gone about his business in ninja-like quietness in Toronto, and we understand all the narratives. We don't need to go down the path of what this team has been up against and their inability to succeed in the playoffs. John Tavares has done nothing but produce. So I do want a piece of what your dad's smoking, most definitely, because he's done nothing but be consistent since coming to Toronto. His first season, 84 points, follows it up with 88, then 60 in 63, 50 in 56 games, 76 points, 80, 65, and 74. Steele, John Tavares is not the reason the Toronto Maple Leafs have not been able to get it done in the postseason. Sure, was he banged up that one run against Montreal? Yeah. Has he been at times quiet? when it comes down to fantasy value and when it comes down to a nice little piece of work by Treliving once again in the front office, the vibe is different around this team immediately already, right? Team-friendly deals. We'll talk about Matthew Knies taking a bit less money to perhaps allow the GM and the front office to put a better product on the ice. In the past, it's all about get me my money, give me, and I'm going to take care of me and the team later. Now that seems to have changed. You got Berube behind the bench. You got Tree in the front office. Does this mean different things on the ice? We'll get there. I love it too. 4.25 or 4.45, whatever it is, AAV. This is a guy that is pivotal to the success of this team on the ice. And when I look about it this way, Steele, before we get to Knies, we love to do comparisons. And one of the things in the fantasy game that is essential to keeping your team on the top is being able to predict when to jettison some of these older guys. We talk about Sid all the time. We talk about Ovi, JT, slowing down your ability to jump ship or hold on to the right points is pivotal. And I would say I'm with you. You're still holding on to JT. Matty Knies, however, a lot more interesting upside here, Steele. What do you think about the deal? And what do you think about Matty Knies' value headed into next season?
I love it too because, again, before the actual deal came out to fruition, there was a lot of talk about it being only a 3 to 5 year deal potentially. They add that extra year in there for 6 years. He's 22, 23 years old, so we're going to get him till he's in the middle of his prime right now. And the fact that he's only 22, he's only played 3 seasons in the National Hockey League, technically only 2 actually, and he went from 15 goals to 29 goals, 35 points to 58 points. His physicality has improved drastically. He's 6'3", 230 pounds. This is a big guy. And he's been in the postseason now every single year, and he's made contribution on that side as well. You see a lot of the time some of these young guys not being able to transition from regular season to postseason, but he's one of those guys that he gets better. He digs in. He gets ferocious out there, and you could see that with his play in the postseason. 7 points in 13 games, some really crucial goal scoring as well. I think this is a fantastic signing. We've sort of seen this from a lot of teams and a lot of players the last couple of years. Jordan Kyrou, Tage Thompson, Robert Thomas as well, somewhere in that 7.5 to 8.5 deal where maybe they could get that extra million or extra money on the side, and they just end up signing a really team-friendly contract, and this is right there in that ballpark as well. I think Matthew Knies, when we talk about, again, the top 5 targets for the Toronto Maple Leafs, he's going to be a top 3 player that we discussed. There's just so much skill set and so much potential with this player, with his size, with his stature, his ability to score goals, as well as create those opportunities in the offensive zone. I love the way he plays. There's not a lot of guys out there that do that. And the fact that he adds that skill set into the arsenal as well, there's not a lot of other players like this in the NHL.
Most definitely. You talk about power forwards, you talk about guys in the fantasy game that give you that peripheral coverage, and already so young in his career, popping almost a 30 piece of goals steal. I think this is a very classic case of Matt Knies doesn't get the kind of love outside of dedicated hockey circles that he should, because he is a Toronto Maple Leaf. If this guy is in a smaller market and people don't want to throw that shade or that hate, and let's be honest, it happens. Matty Knies is on the come up in a big way. And like I just said, fantasy heads, dedicated cats who have been out there, we've been all over Matty Knies, his ability to really have that kind of dogged style, high pressure forecheck, throws the body, is a absolute menace and a problem in front of the net. Talking about net front presence and ability to put up production offensively from, right outside the blue paint, Matty Knies is on the rise there in terms of guys who you do not want to see that guy's big butt in front of the net. It's going to be a problem. So I want to talk about it quickly after the break. We'll wrap up the Maple Leafs. Let's get to Noah Dobson. I think we'll have some time to touch on Kane or Giroux. We'll see, but make sure you guys keep it tapped all week long. All of the free agency news, trades, fantasy fallout right here, and we'll get back to our league-wide coverage of every single team's top 5 targets. That's going to be interesting, Steele, now that they've been shaken up a little bit. We'll get to it. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Summer sports, full swing, baby. And whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green like we are on this show, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You've already been following along on the action. Why not make it even more thrilling with FanDuel? Get in on the game where your friends are already getting sunburned on the beach. We've been all over FanDuel to track the favorite matchups. The app is fresh, new daily promotions and deals to make it even more fun to bet. Right now, if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first wager hits. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel Sportsbook, where you got to check out.
Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review for your boys here, Livingstone and Steele Rodin. We're going to get to Noah Dobson really quickly, and we will have time for Evander Kane as well as Claude Giroux towards the end of the episode. We'll touch on them very quickly as well, but let's wrap up Toronto Maple Leafs Matthew Knies conversation and how this team's going, because they now have $13.5 million in cap space still going into July 1st. So it is going to be interesting to see what Tree Living does, but so far he's done a very good job.
Most definitely. John Tavares, Austin Matthews, William Nylander, and now solidified Matty Knies. I was trying to take a little look around the league, Steele. Didn't have enough time, and I think maybe we can do a little Big Four rundown of some of the best forward groups in the NHL. And yeah, we get to be a little biased on this show because of all of the stress and all of the ups and downs that comes with being a Leafs fan. But let's be honest, at least offensively and with some physicality and size, that top four is looking real good, and I think deserves to be in the conversation as some of the best top four forward pieces in the game today. Other good teams, for sure. I'm not going to say they're the best forward group out there, and we're losing Mitch, so that's obviously another angle, but I think this is just a really nice piece of work by Trey Living, and I'll throw it back over to you with a question before we move on to Noah Dobson. 29 goals from Matty Knies last year. Now, with Matt Knies solidified in that top four forward group, the contract's out of the way, Steele. It's what does he do next season? 58 points? Where are you projecting him? Where do you think you draft him headed into next season?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And the fact that within the span of 2 years, he's almost doubled his point production. He's almost doubled his goal production as well. I think the fact that with the obvious looming potential of Mitch Marner signing somewhere else and kind of creating that open gap. I mean, Matthew Knies has played on the top line with Marner and Matthews the last year and in the playoffs as well. He's been so good with them. I see his point production and his fantasy hockey value rising even further, even without Mitch Marner potentially in this lineup. He gets to play with one of the best goal scorers in the game. Let's keep in mind that Austin Matthews over the last 4 years has 4 consecutive 40-plus assist seasons as well. He's not just a goal scorer. He's also a playmaker. Matthew Knies has that ability to do both as well. He's not just one or the other. He's got the full arsenal in his bag, and he can create those plays. He can capitalize on those goal-scoring opportunities, the offensive zone. He has the potential now to also hit 200 shots, which he hasn't done over the span of his first two seasons in the NHL. The physicality that he brings to the game as well. 2 seasons with over 165-plus hits, power play opportunity as well, game-winning goal potential. He's just going to increase his play time and his opportunities on that top line, at least in the top 6, whether he's with Nylander, Tavares, whether he's with Domi and Matthews potentially. He's an absolute stud out there. I see Matthew Knies. He can go somewhere in the 7th round, maybe even earlier than that. And I could potentially see 65, maybe even 70 points. Again, still very young. He plays a physical game. We have to see how that takes a toll on his body, but I think there's only upside with this player fantasy hockey-wise.
I think 65 to 70 points for this next season slots right into what we can expect without getting too crazy. And that means if he is seeing increased ice time, you're seeing some increased peripherals, which you know are going to come with confidence. And now he's got his big contract under his wing, Steele. This could be one of those situations where, we like to throw out breakouts. and maybe it's a little bit off because last year was pretty close to a breakout for Matty Knies, I would say. This is going to be a very attractive player that now that especially we know he is locked up in Toronto long term. Speaking of which, Noah Dobson, the same in Montreal. I'm excited for your take on this because I've read into it. You know, you look at how that team's going to line up on the blue line. There is still obviously a lot of minutes to go around here in terms of Lane Hudson, Caden Gooley, even a guy in Matheson who they still pay a ton of money, Steele. So I don't know what your take is because I think immediately people would want to say, oh, he went to a better team. He goes to a young team on the rise, more offensively inclined. You want to go immediately. His fantasy value goes way up. I don't know if that's the case because in New York, he had 24 plus minutes all day long of ice time. What's your take here? Still positive. I love the move from Montreal, but what's your take on this for Noah Dobson's fantasy value? Hit me with that.
I love it. I mean, to me, he's still going to be getting over 22, 23 minutes of average ice time. I think there's a possibility that it's him and Lane Hudson, and I think you actually see a reduced opportunity from guys like Mike Matheson, Caden Gooley as well at times, Jaden Struble, Alexander Carrier. I think it's going to be Noah Dobson and Lane Hudson. And you see a lot of teams now, especially on the man advantage on the power play, they run one defenseman on that unit. They have him quarterback the power play. I think it's going to be both Lane Hudson and Noah Dobson on the first unit with Cole Caulfield, with Nick Suzuki, and either Uri Slavkovsky and Ivan Demidov on the right side. So you're going to see 3 forwards. I think you're going to see 2 defensemen on the power play. And the fact, again, with Noah Dobson, that with how bad of an offensive-minded team the New York Islanders are, that he can still 4 years in a row now have double-digit in goals. He had back-to-back 13-goal seasons and then back-to-back 10-goal seasons. And yeah, he dropped from 70 points to 39 points, but that also has to do with the fact of all the injuries and lack of talent up front that the New York Islanders team had, especially with Matt Barzal. There's more skill set in Montreal. I actually really think this makes them a cup contending team. This is going to catapult them to the next level of what we just saw them do this past year, because now we're getting a full season of Ivan Demidov. We're getting a full season of Noah Dobson in this Montreal Canadian uniform as well. Cole Caulfield has also established himself as a 30, 35-plus goal scorer in the league. Nick Suzuki, an underrated superstar in the league with 75-plus points. There's so much to love with this club. I think even the fact of Noah Dobson's average time on ice potentially dropping from, let's say, 25 to 23, which even then, this last year, it was only 23 and a half minutes of average ice time, close to 200 shots on net, over 125 blocks, 55-plus hits. Again, maybe the 70-point season was the outlier. Maybe we can see him more around 45 to 55 points. But that's the floor for me. The fact that there's so much skill set with this Montreal team, I think the love's going to get spread around. I think he's going to see a lot of power play time, a lot of penalty kill time, and we're also going to see him what he can do offensively with Lane Hudson on the blue line as well.
And this team still has some other young top draft picks, first rounders, Reinbacher, Mayu. There are other players here that there is so much to love in what's going on in Montreal right now. Does that immediately translate onto the ice and success in the standings? There's going to still be some growing pains, and that might also happen to Noah Dobson. However, Steele, the New York Islanders last season, 12.6% proficiency on the power play. Only the Anaheim Ducks had worse. And I know the Montreal Canadiens have some kinks to work out of their own, especially on special teams. But immediately this adds an intrigue and an upside to a player that has had his name thrown out there a lot over the last year and a half. This is a very intriguing get for the front office for the Montreal Canadiens. And we were already ready to say this. And we'll talk about it quick after the break. Fantasy hockey goldmine, baby, here brewing in Montreal. You could continue to go back to the well. Let's do the same right after the break. We'll wrap up Montreal, and we'll touch on Kane and Claude Giroux very quickly.
It's a Canadian trade deal episode. Signings all around. It's free agency frenzy month, July 1st. We're coming at you with all those news that you need to break down for your fantasy hockey team. All of that coming up after the break. Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review for your boys here. Let's just wrap up the Noah Dobson. Do you have anything more to talk about or add for the Noah Dobson trade? And then we'll also quickly break down Evander Kane to the Vancouver Canucks, as well as Claude Giroux staying in the nation's capital.
Just super quickly, what it means to me is this division is starting to be extremely tight. And we throw that out there a lot because we look at so many teams. However, if we're buying into the Ottawa Senators turning the page, which I think we both finally agree that series in the first round against Toronto, they're right there. The Toronto Maple Leafs, we expect them to be active. Even with losing Mitch, we still expect them to be a top team. You got the Cup champs, and you got a couple of other really good teams in the Atlantic coming out for blood, and we haven't even really touched on what the Boston Bruins are going to look like this offseason. So to me, Steele, yeah, it's nice. It fires me up for sure. Putting them into the Cup contention conversation, I hear you. I don't know if I would do it myself. What I will say, though, is we are in for an absolute bloodbath in the Atlantic Division, and that actually trickles through our next topic. And Claude Giroux in Ottawa returns. This is a hometown deal as well. He wanted to stay there. I don't know what your take is on Giroux. I think that there is just still so much value offensively because of all of these good young guns that he gets to play with around him. However, hit me with your take and what you would do with Claude Giroux.
Yeah, he's still a draftable guy. There's still lots to love about this Ottawa team and with Claude Giroux, but there's an obvious decline in his game, especially you can see it over the last 3 seasons. He's been healthy. He's only missed 1 game over the last 3 years with Ottawa,
That's
but
key.
he's dropped from 79 points to 64 points, then to 50 points. I think 50 points is exactly where he's going to be contributing and where my projections would be at for Claude Giroux and this Ottawa team. I still think that, with the way and direction the team is headed right now, there is the possibility that Claude Giroux falls into that third line center position role. The fact that you have Dylan Cousins, the fact that you have Shane Payne, where do you put Claude Giroux? Do you also move him to the wing? I know he's dual eligibility, so there's a lot of contributing factors that go into his fantasy hockey value, but the fact that he gets to play with all these young guys is why he's still a draftable player, which is why he has, to me, very good value as well. But again, it's not jumping off the page anymore. 50 points in 1 games, only 138 shots, which is down from 183 the season prior. 64 hits, which is actually up. 41 blocks, which is actually up. Time on ice is down from 20 minutes to 18 minutes and 12 seconds. So the time on ice is definitely getting restrained as well. I think there's, you got to take a step back and see what's going on with Ottawa. There's still value, but I wouldn't be drafting Claude Giroux until at least somewhere around the 14th or 15th round. I think there's a lot more value you can get on the market before Claude Giroux.
I totally agree, and I think this could be the perfect kind of piece to augment your roster if you've really focused on covering other peripheral categories and perhaps loading up on players that are going to bring you a little bit more coverage. Claude Giroux, then, for me, I would be fine slotting him in as, let's say, my second to last forward that I'm drafting to rely on him for offense and for some power play production, because throughout his career, he has been a very good power play producer. 18 points last year, down 1 point from the year before, but combine that with his health, his ability to still be right in that 50 to 60 point realm, and all of the good young studs around him. Timmy Stutz, Brady Tkachuk, Drake Batherson, Dylan Cousins. You mentioned Shane Pinto as well. That's a little bit of an under the radar name that I think we're going to talk about when it comes to the Ottawa Senators for this upcoming season. Take this in, though, and before we just move on, this is an important move. If this team is going to consider itself a cup threat, he gets it done in the postseason, Steele. Even just last year, in terms of postseason production, I believe he had his 6 points in that series against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and you might not be jumping off the page with that. That's important. In his career, 86 points in 101 postseason games. He could be a very pivotal factor for this Ottawa team should they punch a postseason ticket. Not a ton of fantasy connection there, but just shows you that he still's got those hands. There's still money, and the offensive production could come. quickly, very quickly. Evander Kane, yay or nay? In Vancouver this offseason, things are already feeling that they're coming off the rails. Hit me with your take on Evander Kane. Maybe a high risk, high reward potential. I don't know what you think here.
Outside fantasy hockey, I don't understand this trade for Vancouver. The fact that you traded JT Miller to kind of get the toxicity out of there, quote unquote, and then you bring Evander Kane in, who's had some difficulty off the ice with a lot of different things. It doesn't make any sense. It is a head scratcher. It's very confusing. Fantasy hockey wise, though, it's a big thumbs up for me. I think this is a good position for Evander Kane. I think he fits exactly into the culture of Vancouver, fits exactly into how they play their style of game, sort of big and nasty at times. Kiefer Sherwood being a prime example of those guys who just, wear you down game in and game out. If he's healthy, which he has struggled to be healthy over the last 6-7 years of his career, he missed the entire season last season with the Edmonton Oilers. But I go back to his almost full year in 2023-24. He's played 77 games, 44 points, 85 penalty minutes, 220 shots on net, 250 hits. That's still what Evander Kane can do for you fantasy hockey-wise, but he has to stay healthy. I think, honestly, he becomes, to me, the second best offensive weapon for Vancouver. Maybe third, depending on where you put Elias Pettersson, but Quinn Hughes is still number one. I think offensively, you could probably throw in Evander Kane ahead of Jake DeBrusk. Elias Pettersson's probably ahead of Evander Kane, depends. But fantasy hockey-wise, I think Evander Kane might be ahead of Elias Pettersson. That's just me.
Yeah, that might be a bold take. I like the conversation, though, of comparing him to Jake DeBrusk. That's an interesting one. Look, this Vancouver team needs to try and do something a little bit differently. Bringing in a guy who has clearly had off-ice distractions. Everyone's talked about it. You and I don't need to go down that realm. It's just risky once again for a team that I think already has enough inherent risk in this roster. And considering where they've come from the last 2 seasons, I did not expect for them to take a kind of a gamble, a bit of a shot in the dark per se, on a guy in Evander Kane, who also, let's be clear, different kind of pressure going from Edmonton, who are right there knocking on the cup door. Maybe he needs that change of scenery. Go back to where he played junior. I believe he was a Vancouver Giant on the West Coast WHL. This could be one of those things that maybe, change of scenery and the reset. You and I have spoken about it at length, how that can rejuvenate a player's fantasy value. That's the angle that I'm looking here, because if you're talking about taking a risk on a guy in Evander Kane who's not only been inconsistent but injured over the last year and a half especially, this is a very interesting powder keg-like move from the front office in Vancouver when we already are a little bit concerned about a powder keg popping off with what could happen in this offseason. So I can't wait. July 1, happy Canada Day to everybody. Happy Degenerate NHL News Week. And we'll be here to break it all down for everybody every single day.
Yeah, I also don't like the trade from Edmonton's side of things. Like, I understand they're trying to clear some cap space, but I think Evander Kane, especially what he did in the postseason, that's exactly the type of guy you want. So I understand they're trying to clear some cap space for Bouchard and McDavid and trying to add some different pieces, but that's just me as well. Again, July 1st, NHL free agency frenzy day. We're going to be breaking down all the trades, all the signings over the course of the next week. We still have to talk on and touch on Morgan Geekie signing a 6-year deal. Sam Bennett re-upping 8 years in Florida. JJ Peterka also signing with the Utah Mammoth once he was traded. There's so much to talk about all week, so stay tuned in to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, making it your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL Podcast, because there is no offseason, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with local coverage from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And from your boys here, Livingstone and Steele Rodin, we wish you good luck with those summer bets, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Oh, Canada, baby.